raise. We want a 5% pay raise. We want this. It's for the kids. And I got up and I said, this is going to be probably one of the more interesting conversations you're ever going to hear a politician say to you. And I said, I can say this with a little bit of political impunity because your organization, your union, has spent $30,000 in the last 4 years to have me not be your senator. But yet I still am. And I have to tell you that of all the people here, and there were about 100 of them in the room, and most of them were in their late 40s, early 50s, I said, how many of you are concerned about losing your job in the next 12 months? Not one person raised their hand. Not one. And I said, I defy you to find a group of 100 people anywhere in the state of Indiana, maybe even this country, where you won't have at least one person raising their hand concerned that they're going to lose their job. You know, that boggled my mind. And I said, be thankful that you have a job. Be thankful that those of us that are in the private sector that are working very hard to be able to earn some money and helping subsidize schools and subsidizing your salaries, be thankful that you have that security. Because millions of Hoosiers don't have that security. Hundreds of millions of Americans don't have that security. Their children don't have that security. And that is something that I feel very strongly about, very passionately about. And I think a lot of jaws dropped when I said it. I don't think that's what they were expecting to hear politicians say. But I feel really strongly about that issue. And I'm adamant about it. And I think I'm right. Now, the teachers' unions had a little bit of a problem. They've been investing their money in derivatives and hedge funds. And so they've had to close their disability program, and they're having to lay off some of the union employees, about a fifth of their overall workforce. And I feel sorry for those 35 people who are losing their jobs. But as a practical matter, they're experiencing now what so many Hoosiers are experiencing. And for those of you who have been receiving my either e-newsletters or my newsletters in the mail over the last few years, you'll hear me talking a lot about economic development. And I believe strongly that economic development is the most important thing that we collectively as Hoosiers, private sector, public sector, can do. Because every aspect of what we want in our lives come from economic development. Not just job creation, not just pay raises, but when we're hiring more and more people and able to provide more and more people a good quality life, they're going to pay taxes. More taxes means we can then have more money to fund education and give teachers pay raises that many, maybe not all, but many deserve, clearly. That's going to be helpful. But unfortunately, I don't think we've spent as much time focused on the types of jobs that I think are going to be helpful to Hoosiers. We've seen 3 major transition periods in Indiana's history. I was an old history major, so bear with me with this, but I think it's an important thing to point out. For about the first 100 years as a state, so from 1816 to about 1900, we went through an agricultural revolution. Indiana's economy, which is still obviously largely dependent upon agriculture. At that time, 95% of the people in Indiana were farmers, a huge number. We began to see a transition from there to industrial, largely involving the automotive industry. So northern Indiana, but even in Marion County, a lot of people won't remember, but the Stutz Corporation, the Stutz Bearcat, Marmon, these were Indiana companies. The automotive revolution did not occur in Detroit. It started in places like Kokomo and Fort Wayne and Anderson and Indianapolis. Eventually transitioned to Detroit afterwards, but it started here in our state. And we've been able to be the beneficiary of this relationship for the next 100 years. Well, starting with NAFTA in the early 1990s, we began seeing these jobs leaving and going to other places, whether it's China or Taiwan or Mexico, wherever. And now these jobs are going away. So the question becomes, and I think it's incumbent upon all of us to ask this question, what kinds of jobs are we going to replace these jobs with? And I see really the next wave of Indiana's economic development coming up, and it's going to have to be service-oriented jobs. Insurance, banking, finance, logistics, and transportation. Those are the things that Indiana is going to have to be able to embrace, and we're already pretty good at it for a long time. Probably the last 20 years or so. We could do a lot better. But we need to embrace those, and we need to be able to train this next generation of Hoosiers into these types of careers. Equally important, we have to train people who are losing their jobs, who are getting laid off in manufacturing. We need to teach them, give them the opportunity to be trained in these types of careers as well, which are growing industries. FedEx, I see that you're wearing a FedEx, great company. They are having an expansion, of course, at the airport, and you're seeing logistics and transportation really being the next wave. And I think things we can do to be able to help educate not just the young people, but the people who are at risk of their jobs or have lost their jobs through adult training programs, I think that's going to be very helpful to Indiana's economic development over the next few years. I served last year as the vice chairman of a summer study committee on that issue of adult economic development, adult education. And it's something that we need as a state, I think, to do a lot more. But we're making some progress, so I just take some solace in that. With regards to the budget, it is a disaster. The last couple days of the General Assembly reminded me of the Jerry Springer show. Everyone was mad at everybody. Okay, and Steve, the bald guy, apparently, I don't get to watch it that often, but I have from time to time when I was younger. But the bouncer was not there. So you have the President Pro Tem of the Indiana State Senate angry at the governor. You have Luke Kinley angry at Pat Bauer. Bauer's angry at the governor. Everyone's angry at everybody. And the budget, even though it passed the Senate, it will fail. It failed in the House, and now we'll be revisiting this issue Thursday at about 1:30 p.m. There's two trains of thought. The first one is that we'll just have a few days together, and we'll all play nicely, sing Kumbaya, and pass the budget. Don't count on it. There are widely differences of opinion that really it's going to be hard to get common ground, I think, for a long period of time. The Democrats, led by Pat Bauer, say that education funding is very important. I agree. The governor's budget has about a 2 to 3% increase in education spending. And those are real, true numbers. But then the Democrats come back and they say, oh, but those really aren't true numbers. It's really 0.25% of real spending, because we're getting about 1.75% increase of spending from Title I funds from the federal government that are just automatically built in. And so that's really not a 2% increase in spending. Well, if School A has a $20 million budget and they get 2% more at the end of that period of time, it really is. Because who's paying that money from the federal government? We all are. So whether it's coming from local government, whether it's coming from state government, whether it's coming from the federal government, it's your money. You're paying for this. So it's a different mindset, I think, that some of the Democrats have to some of the Republicans. There are going to be massive cuts to a lot of other deemed non-essential government services. Prisons will not have a cut. The state police, public safety will not have a cut. But a lot of the parks will, and a lot of these other institutions will as well. To put this in perspective, though, the state of California, which is dramatically more dysfunctional than we are, not that that's like the guidepost we want to hold ourselves out to, but they are, we'll be looking at a 16% cut in education next year. California is laying off more teachers than Indiana has teachers. Okay? New York, 11% cut in education. Florida is a 16% cut in education. So massive double-digit cuts in education in many large states. So even if we could hold the line, I'd even argue a 0.25% increase is pretty darn good under the circumstances. Not bad. And when you add in the extra 1.75%, I think we're doing pretty well. As difficult as times are in central Indiana, unemployment rate in Johnson County is about 7.6%. Near historical highs. It's going to get higher, in my opinion. Marion County is about 8.6%, so about a point higher than Johnson County. It's going to get higher. You look at some of the counties in the northern tier of Indiana, places where they have the motor coach industry and the RVs, absolutely. You're looking over 20% unemployment. 21, 22, 23, and those are going higher as well. That is absolutely devastating. And as difficult as things are here, I think it's important to remember our brothers and sisters up north.